Walker there. All right, welcome. Glad you're with us on this Friday, July 25th, 2025, for Worldview Tube's Washington Report. All right, I'm a little hot under the collar tonight, folks, so you'll just have to excuse me if I become extremely blunt. You're like, wait a minute, more blunt than normal? Yeah, I know. But here we go. All right, there's a lot to report on, but one of the first things I saw today put out by Thomas Massie was this right here. During August recess, Speaker Mike Johnson, Leader Thune planned to call the House and Senate into session every 4 or 5 days, with practically no one there, for the sole purpose of preventing Trump from making recess appointments. Here was today's House pro forma session. All right, you guys want to see what this looks like with nobody there? Okay, here we go. All right, we're going to call into session. Nobody's there. This is all a game.
The House will be in order. The chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., July 25th, 2025. I hereby appoint the Honorable Mike Herodopoulos to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
The prayer will be offered by Chaplain Kibben.
Oh boy, here we go.
Would you pray with me?
This should be interesting.
Gracious God, as those who have been called from the multitude of communities that make up this great nation now return to their districts, we pray your blessing on them, that they will find time not only to meet their numerous responsibilities, but to refresh, regroup, reframe, and rest after several long months of intense work
because they work so hard. Yes, they work so hard.
Lord, bless them and keep them. Keep them safe from all harm and the unwarranted attacks on their person and their loved ones. Lord, make your face to shine upon them and be gracious unto them, that they will walk in your way and receive your mercy as they turn from the way they may otherwise have chosen that was not yours. Lord, turn your face upon them, that they can do nothing but live into the love they find there. And grant us each your peace in these days, in these times, and in our hearts. Sure of the blessings we receive when we call on your holy name, we offer ourselves and our prayers to you. Amen.
And why do you have to write your prayer down? You can't pray.
Pursuant to Clause 13 of Rule 1, the Journal of the Last Day's Proceedings is approved. The chair will lead the House in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Who on earth is this dude with the flipped hair? Did he lose his scissors? Do they not have barbers in the house? Wow, look at that haircut.
Pursuant to Clause 4 of Rule 1, the following enrolled bill was signed by the Speaker on Thursday, July 24, 2025.
H.R. 1316, a bill to amend the Export Control Reform Act of 2018 relating to licensing transparency.
Pursuant to Clause 13 of Rule 1, the House stands adjourned until 5 p.m. on Tuesday, July 29, 2025.
All right. So they're going to come back in a few days, do this whole circus again, and this stops President Trump from appointing people during recess. And this is compliments of Mike Johnson and John Thune, apparently. But that's in the House. Now, this little tweet today was put out by Congressman Thomas Massie of Kentucky, who I guess you used to be his chief of staff. Were you not, Jim?
I was for a time, yes.
So what do you make of this?
These are what are called pro forma sessions, as you mentioned. They've done it routinely for a long period of time. Recess appointments used to be fairly common. And sometimes, in the past, Congress has said, we'll stay out of session because, we just can't be there and we didn't have enough time to get all the appointments done. There are moves that opposition parties can make to slow things down, and the Democrats have been doing a lot of that. But I just find this really absurd because there are hundreds of appointments that Donald Trump could make so that they can get started going through the process of implementing his strategies and plans that the American people overwhelmingly voted for. Let's just remember that. and they won't do it. I mean, this has been an absurd thing that I've looked at forever. It's very possible, by the way, that there was a deal made with Democrats to do it this way for some other legislative purpose. I think it's absurd. This is an easy no-brainer. They're running home. They have, it's not just been Democrats slowing things down. It has also been John Thune not pushing things. Remember, the House does not have any authority over presidential appointments. That's a Senate function. The Senate is the one that gives advice and consent on nominees. And so the Senate's not doing the work, but the House is doing the bidding of the Senate by staying in pro forma session. There's no reason for the House to be in pro forma session at all, except for this very one purpose. And that's it. It's really the same for the Senate, too. So, yeah, I think it's absurd. I think these guys, let Donald Trump just get people in temporarily if you're backlogged, and then they'll get nominated and the nomination will go through, and then they can continue on where they can get approved. It's outrage. It's an outrage.
It is an outrage. And Mike Johnson has been such a disappointment. But of course, the day I saw him coming down the stairs with Paul Ryan after he was appointed or elected speaker, I thought, oh, there you go. I'm sorry, but Mike Johnson just gives off, in my opinion, the aura of a total wimp. An absolute wimp. But when I found out he was good friends with Tony Perkins, then that's all I needed to know. I mean, let me tell you, I can tell you plenty of things about Tony Perkins, all right? Including the fact that we warned the Family Research Council against hiring Josh Duggar. Okay, we had a pastor from Northern Virginia go to one of their vice presidents and warn him. I called this pastor and said, I think you have a guy in your church who's an elder, who's also over there as a vice president, Family Research Council. You need to get to them and warn them. Because I knew what was going on, because I was warned by a lifelong friend of Mr. Duggar about what was going on. And we were invited to their home at the end of a Worldview Weekend rally in Northern Arkansas. And this lifelong friend, state senator who ran for governor, called me and said, walk away from that conversation. I did. And he said, don't go there. We weren't going to go anyway. I had to get back to Memphis with my family. But we were invited to come over to their home. And he said, when you get on the road, call me. And I did. And he began to tell me the whole story that now the public knows, almost all of it. And I knew that for years. And I tried warning these people in the pro-family movement. And guess what? No one apparently wanted to do anything. And then when it all came out, they were like, ooh, shocker. I'm like, really, guys? Really? Let me tell you something. Tony Perkins, I don't think has the guts to come on this program and debate me over what I just said. And I will tell you, I would almost always prefer, I hate to say this, I would most always prefer to work with a principled conservative who was not spousing their religiosity and spiritualism than I would what I find to be very disgusting so-called pro-life Christian leaders, pro-family Christian leaders in America. They are no different than the people many of them claim that they're trying to oppose. From hanging out with false prophets, false apostles, people who think they're raising the dead, reversing hysterectomies over the television. These people will run to these kind of groups because I guess they smell numbers and money. I don't know why. Pragmatism. But I had to write a whole book called Religious Trojan Horse, The Coming Religious Reich, to try to warn the country about the so-called pro-life religious leaders of America. Most of them are not people I would want to have anything to do with. I just wouldn't. And that's from years of personally dealing with these people. Jim? I've
been in the political realm as a Christian, a follower of the way for more than 30 years now. And there is a serious problem amongst people who claim Christ, who get involved in politics directly or tangentially. I tell people all the time, without going into all the personality things, because this is a generally broad problem, people need to understand what the validity of it is. I have said now for a few years, and I worked around Capitol Hill for 8 years around members of Congress, and I knew or was acquainted with, up to my last day on Capitol Hill, all of the proclaimed Christian members of Congress, and I say about half of them vote like Satan. The reason I say that is this. Not so much because they're particularly evil in a particularly satanic way, but what they are is antinomians. In other words, they don't believe in law. That Christians who claim to follow Christ understand that God has a law, particularly the moral law, but many further iterations off the moral law that are plainly laid out in Scripture. They claim to adhere to that, yet they can't adhere, for example, to the Constitution, which provides, it's not a perfect document, it's a man-made document. But please, there's nothing immoral against Scripture in it. You should follow it to the letter. And they don't vote that way. I mean, Thomas Massey gets beat up on in many ways because he's making a serious attempt to be faithful to that Constitution. You can argue for or against whatever you think his approach is, but that is what's going on. And I maintain that well more than half of members of Congress have probably never read the Constitution all the way through. And they're certainly not voting like it. I wrote an article when Mike Johnson was elected Speaker. Basically, the title of it was, You Prayed, So Now What? And I just went through a litany of things in my mind that say, listen, we need to pray. First Chronicles talks about a nation that prays, God will hear them. That's all great and everything. But if you think that just praying over someone is going to solve any issues in Congress, there's far more to it than that. I mean, the prayer is an active thing, but you need to be taking actions too. What you need to be praying for is for the work of your hands to be effective. Well, that means you go out and do work. That's what Job prayed. You need to have that attitude where you go do work and then ask the Lord to help you with the work by giving you wisdom, by giving you insight, by helping you stay away from trouble. The Lord's Prayer talks about, literally doesn't say, lead us not into temptation. It says, lead us not into trials and deliver us from the evil one. That's a better translation of the Lord's Prayer. That's what we're working to do in prayer, but we're working along the way. These people don't even work towards anything. They have no backbone about saying, listen, this government program is just not constitutional. Like, if we had done that, the Department of Education would have been gone under Republican administrations and Republican Congresses 20 years ago. But here it is still, and it is not a constitutional authority for them to have that at all. So if you are claimed to be a Christian and you're not voting strictly for the Constitution, then you're voting like Satan because you're an opposite land. That's the Antichrist spirit, and that attitude needs to change in Washington, D.C.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's go to President Trump. He's, I guess, signing an executive order to deal with the homeless crisis in America. My wife and I here in the Mid-South, I don't know, a week or two ago, we're driving through East Memphis, and it was just dusk. And there was a gentleman who was, it's Memphis, it's hot, but he was layered up with clothes and sleeping on a bus stop bench. This is a nice part of East Memphis. There's a lot of money in big houses in this part of East Memphis. A lot of expensive shops and stores and restaurants. And he not only was sleeping on this park bench, but he had boxes and boxes and boxes stacked all around him of his, I guess, belongings. And I don't know how. I thought to myself, if he decides to go to another bus stop, or if he gets told to move on, how does he get all that stuff and transport it? Does he have to take some of it and move it, then come back? I have no, it was a lot of stuff. And I thought to myself, that has to be a mental issue. That has to be a mental issue. And, here he was on the street. And I used to go down the first Tuesday of every month for 5 years. I went and led the evening service at the Good News Mission. And I did this from when I was in high school. I started when I was like a senior in high school doing this, all the way forward till I was out of high school for those 4 years. So I did it for about 5 years. And I can tell you firsthand, a lot of those guys in that room were suffering with mental illness. There was one individual in particular who, his name was Carl. And when the service was over that night, everybody got up to go to the dining hall because you came for the service, you got a free meal, and you got a shower, and you got a cot, and then you got breakfast in the morning. And of course, at the first of the month, the crowds were low because they had their government check and could go out and buy booze. Toward the end of the month, they'd run out of their government money, and they were packing them in. So if you wanted the bigger crowd, you would go toward the end of the month. But I was the first Tuesday of every month. And at the end of the service, everybody got up and left to go to dinner. And there was this gentleman who could have been in his 50s, but he looked like he was late 60s, but he just looked older. And he was asleep. And I walked over. He was the only one sitting left in the chairs. And I think that the chaplain was standing at the door watching me and was going to go on down toward the dining hall to oversee what was going on down there. But he wanted to wait to say goodbye to me and see what I was going to do, because I walked over to the gentleman and I tapped him on the shoulder thinking he was drunk, had a hangover. And he was startled and he woke up. I said, "You can go to dinner." He's like, "Oh, okay." And I immediately recognized this guy's not drunk. This is a guy that is, today we would say he was on the spectrum. We would say he was autistic.
Mm-hmm.
And he talked to me a little bit as I questioned him, and he seemed like a child. And he walked out, and I said to the chaplain, "Who is that?" He said, "That's Carl. He is got siblings, but his parents died. His siblings don't want anything to do with him. They won't take care of him." Well, I went on down to the dining hall, and I sat there, and I started talking to Carl. And again, he was like a child. And my heart just went out to this poor guy. And I began to take him out to dinner occasionally. And my wife and I were dating at the time. And I would pick him up with my then girlfriend, now wife, and we would go to Burger King or whatever, and then we would go shopping. Maybe we were going to go to the mall and walk around. We'd take him with us. We bought him some clothes. He thought we were just so wealthy. We're just young kids with nothing. But he thought because we had a car and could go to Burger King and go to the mall and buy him a couple shirts or whatever, that we were somehow very, very wealthy. I brought him over to my parents' house for them to meet him. And I kind of kept tabs on him. And I thought, this guy should not be on the street. And I began to work with the system. And we finally worked and got him into a house. And they would make sure he got his medications and what he needed. Eventually, he went missing. And he had a stroke, and he had to have surgery. He had to have pressure removed from his brain. And I visited with him in the hospital. And I did my best to keep track of him and help when I could. And eventually I lost track of him. And ever since then, I thought to myself, we as a nation have to, if not as I'm not big on tax dollars going for things like this, for charity. But as Christians, as Christian ministries and organizations, as churches, we have got to find ways to help people like Carl. Carl had no business being on the street, to be taken advantage of, to be robbed, to be beat up. It was no fault of Carl's. Carl was not an alcoholic. Carl did not do drugs. Carl was just on the spectrum. He was like very similar to Rain Man. You ever saw that movie? Or Mickey Rooney played a movie back in the early 80s about young man with disabilities. So when I see President Trump signing these kind of things, Jim, I'm thankful, but I also, of course, we got to make sure that the laws are written where people like you and me aren't deemed mentally disturbed because we're Christians. You know what I'm saying?
Well, one of the things that we've changed in terms of public policy over the last 120 years is we got rid of the whole asylum system that can serve in a practical way. Certainly there were abuses. I mean, welcome to 6,000 years of human history proving the radical corruption of man. Yeah, certainly on the edges there were problems. There were a lot of them that served people well, even up into the 1960s. So, and it had their problems too. But the reality is that whole asylum system was a way for people like this to be able to be serviced properly. But I want to broaden this discussion a little bit. One of the reasons so many of these people fall through the cracks is because government has a monopoly on charity. I mean, yes, we are a highly generous country. Hundreds of billions of dollars that Americans give to charity around the world compared to the 2 or 3 trillion that we spend through government that is subject to waste, fraud, and abuse, that doesn't really change the situation for people. It just throws something into someone's lap. I just recorded a podcast just before this with my friend, Dr. Ryan Reeves, formerly of Gordon Cornwell Seminary. I have been drawn into a debate over whether USAID funding should be taken away. And I argue that it should be. But we're told by progressive Christians that you're violating, like you're subject to a sheep and a goat's judgment. You know, you didn't take care of the poor, so therefore you're going to be a goat. And it's absolutely flawed thinking. And I asked my friend Ryan Reeves, who's a theologian, Cambridge PhD, let's talk about this. So we just did. It's going to be rolling out sometime soon. I'm going to follow up with my friend Colin Elliott, who's an Indiana University classics professor, PhD, and because Augustine had a whole lot to say about this. How do you deal with the fact that there's bad in society? You know, back in the early church and prior to the Middle Ages, even through the Middle Ages, like there was no government largesse to take care of poverty. That never happened. This is a very recent phenomenon, except for spotty times throughout history when politicians are trying to get votes. And the church came in from its founding and radically transformed the lives and livelihoods of people found at the edges of poverty. Justin Martyr, in his Apologia that he wrote to Antoninus Pius, the emperor of Rome, he made the case that the church was out doing all these charitable works. We talked about this with Ryan Reeves. And that used to be what the church was about. But there was never any participation in government, and frankly, a lot of headwinds by government. We need to change this paradigm in the United States because it's not acceptable for us to have our taxes taken away from us, thrown into some government bureaucrat. We never touch those people and they never get any better. I'm trying to flesh that out right now and in these 2 podcasts because it is a huge issue. Government really sucks at this. But to Mike Johnson and these guys, what's Congress doing about this? We need to be paring back a bunch more of this. And you got Democrats screaming and yelling about Medicaid money. If Medicaid went away tomorrow, these systems are already built up in the states where they would have authority to do it, and they'd probably do it better or reduce it in ways that would make it go directly to the people most necessarily in need of it. But Congress just throws this money out to the states through Medicaid, and there's just a bunch of inefficiency involved with it, and as we know now, fraud. Politicians love to give money away. They love to take your money from you and give it to someone else. This is a major problem, and Christians should oppose it. We got to get back on track and back to natural charity that happens out of a Christian heart, not out of some government bureaucrat's dream.
Absolutely, 100%. Look at this clip. Here we go, guys.
Today, the president signed an executive order intended at addressing this issue with several key steps. It directs Attorney General Pam Bondi to reverse rules that limit municipalities' abilities to relocate homeless people. It also redirects federal resources to ensure people are sent to facilities for rehabilitation and substance abuse to get the treatment they need. San Diego County Supervisor Jim Desmond applauds the executive order.
I'm ecstatic. I mean, finally, we're going to get to the root causes of homelessness.
This executive order also calls for increased accountability in how the government provides and funds homelessness assistance and transitional living programs. That includes ending support for Housing First policies, which the federal government says deprioritize accountability and fail to promote treatment, recovery, and self-sufficiency. Desmond hopes the state will back the federal government's approach.
I'm hopeful that the state of California and the governor say, hey, we'll take your help, federal government. We'll take your dollars. We'll build mental health facilities. We'll put in the right treatment centers. We'll change from a Housing First to treatment and care.
Yeah, well, a lot of these people do have alcoholic and drug problems, substance abuse. And then some of them, like I said, are just like Carl. They are there of no fault of their own. Their parents have died. Maybe even their siblings who are taking care of them had to go to a nursing home. They went to the hospital. They died. And these people are on their own. And of course, and I'm not a big fan of big church buildings. I hate big church buildings. There's no reason any church should have an auditorium that seats 3,000 or 4,000 people. That is the most selfish, self-centered, egotistical thing you could do. Is for a pastor to say, I'm going to build a building that seats 3,000 or 4,000 people. Who do you think you are? Okay. You really think you can shepherd 3,000 or 4,000 people? No, you cannot. You know you can't. And don't tell me, oh, we have Sunday school classes and you go and you get involved in there and baloney. You cannot shepherd that many people, nor should you. You should be planting additional churches instead of people driving in 30, 40 minutes, an hour away. But they build these humongous buildings as monuments to themselves, and the church isn't doing what the church is supposed to be doing, which is being salt and light and caring for the widows and the orphans. And we should be doing it, not the government. We have plenty of money to do it. If the government would leave us alone, quit stealing our money, and then the churches would prioritize their mission statement according to the Bible and not the egomaniacs that run most of these churches. That's my opinion.
Well, let's just be honest here. The way that government operates, it has helped facilitate the laziness of the church.
Yes, it has.
In these areas. By the way, when I was in the 1990s for a time, I attended a church. Well, first of all, a church called Community Church of Southport on the south side of Indianapolis, and then Community Church of Greenwood. Community Church of Greenwood was founded by Dr. Charles Lake, and they had a really successful ministry when he founded that church. He's an Asbury grad. And they did discipleship. You couldn't be a member until you went through their 9-week discipleship course. And it was a very extensive one. It was actually based on his PhD work. But if you ended up if he ended up growing to about 1,500 people, they would immediately seek a church plant somewhere else and set up a pastor there. By the end of his ministry, which he's since retired, I think the number of people in those churches that they planted exceeded 30,000 people. And they kept them small and capable of growing. In fact, many of those churches were doing the same thing. That's what the pattern that should be there. I don't know what the number is of the size of church. I just know that when you have these massive churches, don't even pretend that you're building disciples. And most of the time, what they're about is building ministries as opposed to ministry. Yeah. And that becomes a real, when it gets that big, that's the temptation.
Clubs. They're building clubs and social centers. And yet, look how many of these large churches now are sitting empty, and they're being bought by now mosques. They're being bought by Muslims. They're turned into mosques. And these buildings are sitting empty, and the numbers have dwindled. And now they have a small group of people trying to maintain the electricity bill, and the heat and air bill, and the maintenance on these gigantic buildings, because people showed up at a time when they were following an individual. That guy dies, and then the church collapses, or they have a split. It's just ridiculous. I have to remind everybody, for like 200 years after the resurrection, there were not church buildings. They met in homes.
There's something even more sinister taking place that is feeding on this. There are two major pastors in this country who had sought to literally steal a church ministry from a local church body. One was successful, David Platt of McLean Bible Church in Northern Virginia, but also J.D. Greer in North Carolina. There's a documentary on him that came out recently. He's a former Southern Baptist Convention president. Yep. His church was attempting to steal and undermine the church board of another large church in the Charlotte area. They almost did it, but the people were able to fight back. McLean Bible Church was unable to. But they're expanding ministry so they can make more money, have more influence, and this is also what's taking place.
And
you
know what, Jim? You know what? I just in my book, Marxianity, a lot of them are now into partners with the government. They're getting money from the government, local, state, and federal, for social services, which is where a lot of money is. A lot of money is there.
This is George W. Bush's problem with faith-based initiatives.
That's right. We need to pick this up next week. Great job. Take care, Jim.
You're watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brannon Howse.
You woke up with a sore throat and a low-grade fever. You know you are getting sick, so here's your choices. You can get sicker and miss work, try to see a doctor this week, or sit hours in a crowded waiting room at urgent care.
I have a smarter option for you. Open your medical emergency kit. Match your symptoms to doctor-recommended prescription in your booklet and take the right meds now and get well faster.
This is not a first aid kit. It's like having an urgent care in your home. It includes doctor-prescribed medications to treat over 39 medical issues like respiratory infections, strep throat, pneumonia, UTIs, and more.
No waiting to see the doctor and no standing in line at the pharmacy. It's right here.
Every home should have at least one medical emergency kit, and here's how to order.
Go to worldviewhealthcare.com. Your kit to treat dozens of common and serious illnesses is rushed to your door. worldviewhealthcare.com. That's worldviewhealthcare.com.
The emergency kit available at worldviewhealthcare.com. Make sure you don't have to go to urgent care. I got pneumonia. I didn't have to go. I took this last year. Stayed at home, went to bed. Tonight on the Worldview Report, former CIA Director John Brennan is lawyering up after the declassification of a report that accuses him of treason for using shoddy intelligence and secondhand information to create the now discredited Trump-Russia collusion hoax. Second Amendment advocates are celebrating a big win for gun rights, and it's happened in a most unlikely state. The world of professional wrestling is mourning the loss of one of its most iconic names. Ukrainians, they stream out into the streets to protest the corruption of their dictator, Vladimir Zelensky. RFK Jr. orders a major investigation into the organ donation industry in America after finding horrifying practices of taking organs from patients who are still alive. And Amazon makes a big purchase in the so-called wearables market. We'll explain how it will impact you. All these stories and more as the Worldview Report begins right now.
This is Worldview Report with host Brannon Howse. Whether it is news from the nation's capital or your state capital, from the classroom to the boardroom, from national security to national and local news that impacts you and your family, Worldview Report is your trusted source for vital and uncensored news. And now, here is Brannon Howse.
Good evening and welcome to the Worldview Report. I'm Brannon Howse. Leading off tonight, we have disturbing reports that organ donors may be at risk for having their body parts harvested while they are still alive. And the Trump administration has launched a sweeping reformation of the U.S. organ transplant system. The move, it was announced by Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., comes on the heels of an investigation by the department's Health Resources and Services Administration. They revealed highly unethical practices by a major organ procurement organization. Kennedy said in a statement, quote, "Our findings show that hospitals allowed the organ procurement process to begin when patients showed signs of life, and this is horrifying.